Now there's a very important note over here about attributes. And there are many hadiths that you will find in the words of Ahlul Bayt, peace be upon them, that really emphasize this point. And it seems that many Muslims throughout history have not understood this point. When it comes to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to make a distinction between our physical, worldly attributes and the attributes of God. When it comes to the human being, you have two things. You have the human in addition to an attribute. So when you say that Muhammad is knowledgeable, right? You're giving Muhammad the attribute of knowledge. But Muhammad and knowledge are two distinct entities, two distinct things. You have the essence, the existence of Muhammad. In addition to that, you have knowledge. So knowledge is actually not part of Muhammad, it's supplemental to him. It's additional. It's not something that goes back to the essence of Muhammad. And the proof is that there was one point in which the human being had no knowledge. Then he acquired knowledge. This is an indication that knowledge is not an intrinsic attribute that defines you. It's something that you acquire. The same with all other attributes. Life. There was that point where I did not exist. Then life was given to me. Power. At one point I have absolutely no power. Then power is given to me. So when it comes to the human being, we see that the attributes are not part of the human being. They're not part of our essence. When it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attributes of God are exactly His essence. You don't have an essence called God and additional attributes. Knowledge, the knowledge of God is His essence. The power of God is His essence. Hence, God is knowledge. It's not God has knowledge. God is knowledge Himself. God is power Himself. God is life Himself. This is a little bit difficult for our comprehension to grasp because we human beings, we're not familiar with that. Everything around us that we see has an essence and an attribute that's added to it, except God. The only being that there is no separation between the essence and the attribute is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because if you say that God is distinct from His attributes, you give Him parts and you make Him in need. Because now God will have all these parts. You have God and then part of Him is knowledge, part of Him is power, part of Him is life, and so on and so forth. All the other attributes. That makes God in need to those parts. And that is a way in which you divide His essence. And God's essence is indivisible because it's infinite. You cannot divide it in any way. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it comes to these sifat al-jamal, the attributes of beauty, which indicate completeness and perfection, God is actually those attributes. So God is knowledge. It's not that you have God and He's knowledgeable. No. God Himself is knowledge. That's beyond our comprehension because we can't grasp the essence of God. But God Himself is power. So God is actually one thing. His essence, His knowledge, His power, they're one thing. But we just use these words to refer to different aspects of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, God is one. Any proof for this idea for example, there are proofs from the Holy Quran, but something very clear like from the Hadith, for instance, yes. We have the words of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam in Nahj al-Balagha. In fact, in the very first sermon, he says, وَكَمَالُ تَوْحِيدِهِ الْإِخْلَاصُ لَهُ. The highest level of believing in God al-ikhlasu lah, to regard God as pure and to show that full sincerity. وَكَمَالُ الْإِخْلَاصِ, how do you achieve that full ikhlas? How do you regard God as completely pure? نَفْيُ الصِّفَاتِ عَنْهُ, the Imam alayhi salam says, and the perfection of his purity is to deny him attributes. Why? Because every attribute testifies that it is different from that which the attribute is given to. When you give the attribute of knowledge to Zayd, to Amr, to Muhammad, that attribute witnesses that, hey, I'm different from that essence because you're giving me to that essence. So I'm different. لشهادة كل صفة أنها غير الموصوف. Whenever you describe something, you give something an attribute, the attribute in itself witnesses that it's different from that essence. Because I as an attribute, you're giving me to that essence. So there's a distinction between us. There's a difference. There's a separation. Whereas when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, absolute Tawheed means you negate all of the attributes from Him. And you say, God is just one reality. He doesn't have multiple attributes that define Him. God is one. That's absolute Tawheed. Now, many schools of thought don't grasp this. You will find them when describing God. They fail to realize this point. Secondly, they even ascribe anthropomorphic qualities to God, physical qualities to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn Taymiyya, right, who's regarded as Shaykh al-Islam to many schools of thought, he says, وَلِرَبِّنَا عَيْنَانِ نَظَّارَتَانِ, God has two eyes through which He sees. And then he says, God has a hand, but not like any other hand. But He has a hand. Because He says in the Quran, the hand of God. They misunderstand these metaphorical verses in the Holy Quran. They take them to be literal. And Bukhari says on the Day of Judgment, Allah will stick His leg into hellfire and hellfire will say, enough, enough. So they actually do believe that God has some physical, attributes. And this is problematic. And one reason is because many of them have failed to understand this fundamental point. That it's not that you have God as an essence and then you have attributes attached to Him. No, God Himself is His attributes. So you could say God is knowledge, God is power, God is life, and so on and so forth. I know this is a little bit difficult to grasp, but any questions about that, or this seems to be clear?
Why do you say it's difficult to grasp? When you think about it, it makes full sense.
It makes full sense, but because our, mind is limited and we are familiar with only the second type, which is attributes being added to an essence, it's difficult for some people to see that God, His essence, is those attributes themselves. Because in their mind, they always see a separation between the essence and an attribute. So yes, it is very clear. That's the core of Tawheed. But many people also fail to realize this fundamental point. So whenever you conceive of God, of course, we cannot conceive of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But whenever you think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't think that God, is this essence that you think of as a distinct essence and then God has these attributes. No. God Himself is power. God Himself is knowledge. Because God is not in need. He's indivisible. There's just His essence and nothing else. That essence is knowledge and power and all of His attributes combined. And that's really the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the Quran says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, there is nothing like him. Literally, there's nothing like Him. Nothing resembles Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's truly amazing. You know, one of the meanings of Allah, what's the meaning of Allah? Al-Ilah, the God, that's one meaning. But there's another meaning. It comes from the word alaha. One hadith says Allah, his meaning, the definition of God, alaha al-khalqa an ma'rifatih. God has blocked the creation from knowing Him. So alaha means to block. So one of the meanings of Allah is, we don't say this, right? But the blocker, the one who blocks. Alaha al-khalqa an ma'rifatih. Because it's impossible to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who can know God? It's impossible. So when you say Allah, that's what it means. And in fact, narrations indicate the more you have this tahayyur, right? This, when you look at the vastness of the universe and you feel sometimes so small, I don't want to say the word hesitation or confusion because that's not what tahayyur really means. Because confusion and hesitation are usually taken negatively. But when you're put beyond something that's just beyond you, you're in awe, right? You just don't know what to make of it. Hadiths indicate that the higher your belief becomes, the more ma'rifah you gain of God, the more you become in the state of awe and confusion. God, what are you? The one who has very, very weak faith, he thinks he really knows what God is. He has a very clear image of what God is and how God functions and what His attributes are. That's weak faith. Because by doing so, you've limited God in your own mental image. That's why for the true believers, the more they rise in faith and knowledge and ma'rifah, the more they feel in a state of awe. That's kind of like just confusion, You just bedazzled at the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, I don't know what your essence is. And the more you don't know what His essence is, the more you know Him. That's an interesting irony over here, right? The more that you bring yourself not to know the essence of God by not limiting Him, the more you actually come to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a very interesting irony over here. Because the more you try to grasp the essence of God, you're going to put delineations and limitations and mental images and borders, the more you've limited Him. So keep Him unlimited as much as you can. But the more you keep Him unlimited, the more that awe grows. What is then? What is God then, right? The more you go through that state of awe, the more you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now only the infallibles can do that, negate every type of limitation from God. Hence in one hadith, the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says to Imam Ali alayhi salam, "Oh Ali, only you and I know God. Only you and I know God." In this part of the hadith. Because the infallibles, they don't put any limit on God. Most of us, we've put limits on God without even noticing it. We just have, some sort of mental images of God. When I say image, I don't mean like how God looks like. No. That's obviously, a type of very, very low faith if you actually see God in an image. But we have limitations on God in our mind because our minds are limited. But because the Ahlul Bayt are connected to that infinite source, Allah has given them that ma'rifah. So that state of bewilderment and awe, the more it is, actually, the more you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're just in awe at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And hence, by the way, while Islam encourages us to think and contemplate about pretty much any field, there's one exception. We have many hadiths in the book of Kafi. We'll, inshallah, examine them for those who attend the course on Al-Kafi later. We see that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt prohibited, even the Prophet, they prohibited from the people from thinking about the essence of God. Don't think about the essence. The more you begin to think about the essence, the more you begin to limit the essence of God. The more you begin to limit the essence of God, the less you know Him. And you're not really worshiping Him then. You're just worshiping something you've invented in your own mind.
In essence, your faith gets weaker as you do.
If you limit God, yes, the faith gets weaker without you even realizing it.
It's prohibited to think about the essence?
See, we examine these attributes, but don't think about the essence of God. What is it? What's it composed of? How did it get? All these, when you try to figure out in your brain what is the essence of God, you're actually going farther away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because your limited mind can never grasp the unlimited. Never. Can you, fill a small bucket of water with the oceans? It's just impossible. It just can't take it. Doesn't have the capacity. So in this interesting hadith, the Imam Ali says, one good way not to limit God, whenever you think of His attributes, knowledge, power, negate. Say God has no ignorance. But what's His knowledge? Don't even try to think what His knowledge is. Is it husudi? Is it huduri? Is it this or that? Because there's many theories. I just mentioned two over here. Philosophers have a lot of theories as to what God's knowledge is. In other words, the Imam is saying here, don't do that. You'll be limiting God. You don't know what His knowledge is. His knowledge is His essence. It's His that. And don't think about the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لا تتفكروا في ذات الله, as the hadith states, and we have a number of hadiths. Do not think about the actual essence of God.